Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled From Data to Decisions, Using the Common Materials Framework to Drive Sustainable Product Selection, sponsored by Kingspan. My name is Nick Venner, and I am the Senior Marketing Manager for Greenbuild. Before we dive in, I have a few quick housekeeping items to go over. First, if you experience any technical difficulties, audio issues, video problems, anything like that, please try refreshing your browser. That usually resolves most issues. And if problems persist, our support team is standing by to help. Second, we'll have a Q&A session after today's discussion, so please don't hesitate to submit any of your questions throughout the presentation. You could submit your questions using the Q&A section in the webinar interface. We'll be monitoring it closely, and our panelists will address as many questions as possible at the end of the discussion. Now, before we get started, I want to share one quick reminder that Greenbuild's lowest registration rates end this Friday. So if you want to lock in the lowest rates on your Greenbuild 2026 pass, you can register this week. Now that we have all that out of the way, I'm excited to introduce today's speakers. We have Lana Rerick is the Director of Regenerative Design Materials at Perkins&Will, Jack Dinning, Materials Technical Lead at Brightworks. Now, I'll hand it over to Brent Trenga for Kingspan, and he can get us started. Brent, take it away.
Thank you so much, Nick. Yes, thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Brent Trenga. I'm the Director of Sustainability for Kingspan North America. And excited to host this session with two good friends and colleagues. We've all been working on this for quite some time. Jokingly, that seems to be the legacy of our careers at some point. But wanted to get into a little bit of the common material framework, what's driving some of this, and really break it down into some kind of tangible sections and pieces of where we have come from and where the problem really lies that we're trying to solve. Understanding really the data challenge, the common materials framework and the data challenge, a little bit of how to design and to implement some of these tools and what we're doing with the information in terms of strategies, and then where we're going to go. So for those of you who are not familiar, we're going to give a little bit of an intro here. Lana's going to walk through a couple slides just to set the baseline and really explain some of the problems and some of the challenges that we're trying to solve. So I'll hand it over to Lana.
Thanks, Brent. Yeah, talking about legacy, we'll start with this slide. I had the pleasure in 2018 leading the creation of the AIA Materials Pledge. And what we were trying to do with the Materials Pledge is to define a holistically regenerative material, knowing that that doesn't exist. If it did exist, it would support human health, climate health, ecosystem health, and social health and equity in a circular economy. This comes into play because not just because there's a definition of holistically responsible materials, but it's all about how do we get to impact. So first we had to define our North Star, and then we had to start looking at how do we get there. So if we go to the next slide.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. There we go. Hold on. It's a little slow.
So once we had created the Materials Pledge, we had a vision of where we were going, but we still had a marketplace, and we still mostly do have a marketplace, but there's a lot of fragmented, confusing demands, even within, understanding these impact categories of how we start to move towards a regenerative material. People are all asking for different things. It's really confusing. It's pretty ineffective. And what we really do is to get to alignment to scale and accelerate market transformation. And what we need to get to that alignment is a common language.
Yeah.
Next slide. So Jack, who's been in this work for us for a long time, in 2022, he was like kind of the brains behind the Common Materials Framework. But it took a village. There were a lot of us involved in initially looking out at the ecosystem of eco labels, certifications, product disclosures, and saying, what are the things that will help us start moving towards this North Star, help us start moving towards the regenerative materials? What are the things that we can do now? And that's a lot of what we're working on. The other piece that we're working on, and we'll get a little bit more into that, is like digitization. A lot of this has been really manual work, a lot of Excel spreadsheets. Oh, sorry. I see that I was on mute at the beginning, so I don't know exactly what uh might have missed out on, but
I think
um
you're good. Yeah.
okay, good. So moving on to the next slide.
Yeah.
So this is really what we're talking about when we're talking about the Common Materials Framework, is there's all these different certifications, standards, disclosures, and what this Common Materials Framework really does is map out all the pieces of data that are going to start helping us move in the direction that we want to move in and get to that digital place where we can be more effective and impactful in our work. So we can all get out of spreadsheets, but to all get out of spreadsheets, we need to really understand the structure of the data that we're organizing around. So the Materials Pledge impact categories gave us these overall categories, but there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of detail under the hood of those pieces of data that we can really take action on now to really make impact and start moving in that direction that we want to move to. So we're working on everything everywhere all at once, but the goal is to get to digitize scalable data so we can start moving on to the next things that we need to work on. And in my role at Perkins&Will, a lot of what we're looking for is this is really a data management problem. We have data about products and materials on every single project that we work on. Now we have increasing uses of those data. Obviously, we have the traditional uses of those data in project specifications and finish legends, but we also need to do materials pledge reporting now. We have lead version 5 that's becoming, more complicated, and the exports of those materials calculators. Now we have a lot of clients that want to move faster and farther on healthier, low carbon materials, and even some that are starting to get into those trickier categories like ecosystem health and social health and equity. So we need a place of truth for our projects and a place that we can work so that we can know that we're making the impacts that we want to make without kind of spinning our wheels in a lot of spreadsheets and manual work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when I feel like that there's how many scorecards are we going to ask someone to fill out for a given project? And it's like, can we focus time more on doing the good work, like making the good material decisions and not just filling out a different spreadsheet for your lead scorecard, for the project, client requirements, for the AIA pledge? Like, this is like the real dream of how we can have digitized data. If we can have it a place where you're tracking project in one place and then report it out to the different functions, like digitized data can just make the workflow so much more seamless.
Yeah. Yeah.
And building, oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, like, building on that, we're asking people right now, you have to be a subject matter expert to not just care about these issues, but to like make materials decisions based on them. And the other thing that digitization is going to bring us is the ability for those subject matter experts within a company or within the industry at large to start setting criteria that others can trust and follow and have that criteria be digitally managed.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go on. I think it's you guys are a perfect example. There's a handful of people in any given firm that is that expert level knowledge. And then how do you scale that, right? There's only so much you can share, and every team is working different times, different, you know, deadlines. The interesting part from the receiving end of those, Jack, those spreadsheets is it's a lot of just simply passing along an ask, and they're not even sure what they're asking for, right? It's just somebody asked me to fill this out, somebody asked me to go get these documents, so now I'm asking you to to provide some of the information where we're not really using the content or making decisions on any of it or making better decisions potentially on any given category or any given product. It's simply chasing down information, but we're not digesting it, analyzing it, using it to make better or to possibly change a decision. We're just going through these kind of steps, which is it's gotten us to a point where it's not the worst decision, but we surely have a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, I mean, that's really where, like, if you're losing the real meaning and content behind why are we doing this? It takes a lot of the drive and passion out of it. Like to be like to say, all right, I know I have to have an HPD or a disclosure for this, versus saying like, no, we're trying to address PFAS because it's a carcinogen, and we're trying like in this project we want to make sure people aren't exposed to it, or we want to like
Yeah.
protect fence science communities, or whatever the impact area is. The why is what really motivates and drives people to really make better decisions and to defend that product spec.
Yeah.
So if it's just like, yeah, I got to chase another eco label, it's not really driving anyone or motivating them to really.
Yeah. And it also goes to the point where we've seen so much focus on certain product sectors or narrow sets because there's just so much bandwidth, right? We had a lot of discuss for years. There's been a lot of great work on interior finishes because that was kind of collectively says, okay, I think we can kind of wrangle and get our hands around finishes. We can look at carpet and paint and furniture and isolate. There's so many products that go to any given building. You got to focus on what you can contain and what you can influence and what you can actually make a difference. And that's just, again, that's the same scale issue. When you start to collectively gather data and review data and have tools like we're talking about, that work can be much more robust. It can be a lot broader impact where we can't do that the way we're working today.
Yeah, the other thing I would say about that is that there's so many other factors into how you choose materials and products. And so working, at Perkins&Will, I have the pleasure of working with so many colleagues who care so much about these issues. But I spent the majority of my career as a project architect and a spec writer. uh, I need to know the other attributes too. So
Yeah.
if I can have all the information in one place, if I can have all my architecture and designer colleagues see that this product also meets ASTM E84 Class A fire rating in the same place that they're seeing that it hits their human health criteria and is low carbon, then that's a win. Then I can connect my colleagues who have their heart in the right place, but don't have the time to go chase down this information. And sometimes I don't even know like what information they need to chase down. If we can just see it all in one place and it
Yeah.
becomes a true workflow tool, that's the dream.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, which is the ultimate win here is when we just start to see this information flow into specifications. Like we're actually seeing it as the process right now is business as usual. We go through the same workflows, project to project, specs have to be written. There's hesitation to say we're going to introduce a new product or a new level of specification. But I think we're starting to make that leap. I've seen it. I've seen a lot of owners and a lot of building projects come through with specifications on VOC limits, not just a VOC requirement, but an actually limit put in there. I've seen carbon thresholds put in specifications. You're seeing other specific certifications or a list of qualified certifications. That to me tells me it's a market signal that information is getting across the line. Owners are comfortable with it. The architects are becoming more comfortable with it, and they're willing to say the specification is such a critical document that we'll put this in our specs. That's a really big. I feel like we've jumped over a pretty big chasm. For years, that wasn't the case. It was these nice to have conversations, but also easy to lose. It's now holding its way all through the project, which this is working, right? It's coming through.
Brent, how much does having CMF in like with all these different asks coming in, or even seen in specs, if people are asking for like slightly different things or in different ways, I think that's like, is that one of the drivers that originally is like, oh, that kind of fragments, like what exactly should we be working towards the North Star? Like, is that something? And I can say even on background of CMF, the first version of it, we had 600 plus different factors. We just charted the whole landscape and realized like, all right, we really got to consolidate this to focus on what are the priorities to start with. But is that helping to kind of focus, like if I'm seeing the same thing in specs over and over as a manufacturer, that's what you're like looking to prioritize?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Jack. I think me personally, it's hard to tell when we get specs. A lot of them still are driven. There's a lot of lead driven specs, right? And you don't know, and in fairness, either way is you don't know if they're actually registered and chasing a certification, if they're going for lead 4, gold, or whatever it may be, or if they're still using that as the base decision to say, hey, we're going to ask for these things because they are good design decisions and they're good material choices, but it's starting, I think, to funnel down. To your question, I think we're getting a little bit more consistent, precise asks. What I really hope to see, and I think what you're going to show, and we're going to continue to talk about, is organizations, owners, operators are being able to build really their portfolio asks. They're being able to hone and modify. This is how we design all of our buildings. These are the base requirements we need to see. Like we've talked about some of that, and Lana, from your side, like the design firms have a lot of that intent. But I think once we get that level at the owner side, and they're really every ask is the same, we can really see massively adoption. Your speed changes completely, at a whole different level, which again, I think we're getting there. And I know there's a handful of customers we're working with they've updated this, they've gone through and they're working with the CMF, they're working with you guys and with Brightworks, who we'll talk through too, to guide some of that, right? And I'd say that's only changed in the last year or two, that we're getting much more consistent requests rather than the anything, right? The random email asking for any random thing on a Friday. I need these submittals and I need these documents to back it up. So we're definitely going that direction.
Yeah, I think the problem with that question is like a confusion that a lot of people get about the CMF. You probably won't see the word CMF in your project specifications, but you might see disclosure threshold of something like a health product declaration or declare label being a requirement. And I think that the thing that this common materials framework is giving us is that set of like, what are the priority data points? And I think there's like a little over 50 that have been identified as CMF priority data points. Like, what are the things we can ask for now or ask for in the near future? And can we all ask for them in the same way? So I think that's the thing that the CMF gets us, is that we can start, pulling out those pieces of requirements. But like the connection between the work the project team is doing and picking the materials palette that really helps their design intent sing, and connecting that to things I can actually specify. Like that's the magic, is that I have to know that my basis of design and acceptables can meet certain CMF data points, for want of a better way of framing it, can meet that criteria before I can write it into a specification.
100%. I think that's a perfect segue into the next big rock here that we have to lift. And Jack, this is kind of for you. This is your wheelhouse in so many ways, but the data has always been the fundamental piece that we're missing, right? The ask, the knowledge, the certifications, it's all sitting in this, this kind of sphere of information, but how we start to synthesize it down to decision making in terms of product level and project level requirements is really what you've been working on for a number of years. So I'll let you explain a little bit of this, and we'll talk through it as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the actionability, once they start getting these hundreds of different data points and sustainability factors and design performance, you name it, in one place, it's like, what's the actual framework for turning that into action decision trade-offs? So yeah, a little background with basic, better, best, or BBB. Brightworks, Perkins&Will, Green Commons, and an amazing collective of clients have been working on it for about 3-4 years now. Pretty much think of it like a layer on top of the common materials framework. So if the CMF gives us really like all our data points, all the things that the raw data we're going to want to be tracking, BVV then looks at, in a given category, given impact area like human health, climate health, where is that category now? Like what is considered basic in that category? So it's probably doing like a little more than just average, but like what's the floor we want to set of like, this is starting to do a little better than normal. And then at the best end of the spectrum, like what's the North Star we really want to be working towards? That's really going to define like, what is the best version of a healthy insulation look like, or a healthy carpet, or whatever the given category is. And then better becomes a sort of stepping stone in between that can help drive progress between them. But with just the proliferation of certifications out there, it's really helpful to have say like, well, is this one better than that, and at what impact categories? So to have a couple tiers to be able to say, well, here's these ones at these levels are basic, these are a little better, and this is really what we're looking for. Can give that kind of like context or framework, and realizing that like we have to do it. So there was basic, better, best at first at the product level. Um, and we realized we have to kind of keep it more granular, break it down that something might be best in health, best in circularity, best in carbon. Those trying to conflate them or blend them into one variable, it really works better to be able to say, to kind of express those trade-offs and the different values. Um, that also gives the versatility then of some clients or projects are going to be really focused on carbon, and that's going to be the driver. And they're going to say like, that's a minimum requirement. The health might be like a aspirational or a stretch goal, but it might not be the mandate for that given client or project. And the same can be true vice versa. So to be able to have that versatility of um, what impacts are going to be matter most to a given project client while still all using the same sort of framework or basis, can allow people to start to align around using the same system for it.
Absolutely. I mean, before you move on to the next slide, I want to put this in context from a manufacturer, because I think this to me is a huge lift to drive innovation. Competitiveness is a good thing in this market, right? Like, we work in a capitalist environment where if you're sitting on the sidelines and you haven't done anything and feel like, oh wow, how am I going to be, I'm going to be eliminated from specifications, or I can't work with Perkins&Will because they don't have some of these things. Tools like this map out, this is what the competitors have, right? At multiple levels. And it gives you pathways to say, this is a great example. You can go with an HPD, you can go with a clear label or red list, you can go with cradle to cradle. It doesn't mandate that you have to go do one particular thing. It's mapping out all the pathways that you have as a manufacturer. And there's pros and cons to each one of those three that I just gave you examples of, but says this is where it would place me. This is I'm at a basic level, and I want to move my product, or I want to put my company in a better position. This is where I have to lead. Or you're already in that kind of, everybody's in the same category, and you want to be more innovative. You want to bring a product to market that's new, and you don't want regrettable substitutions. This has a huge impact on how we design and how we use it from an architectural side, from a specification side, from an owner impact. But I don't want to overlook the value of what this could do to change the products that we make, how we make them, the companies that are making them. This really is a giant tailwind to push along the innovation side, and for people to recognize, here's where I sit as a company or as a product vendor. This is where I want to be, right? Like that, we've never had that kind of vision. Doing a desktop analysis of your competitor is time consuming. It's very kind of, it's kind of a point in time where tools like this, especially if you make a whole lot of products, right, and you're competitive with all of them against your vendors, this is really, this will do great work for the industry.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, especially like in some categories where there's not many products that are best, or even like it's really
Mhm.
something that's saying, this is what, if you can make an insulation without flame retardants in it, you're going to be ahead of the market and you're going to be the
Yeah.
first one who's doing that. But it gives a North Star, like what we would love manufacturers to start doing green chemistry and working towards while still having usable, actionable standards today.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's a great way to identify blind spots, right? Where there's some things you're like, wow, I didn't even realize that this was going to be such an issue, or this is something that the industry wants, because nobody's addressed it. No, none of our competitors have really gone down this road in a particular category, a particular issue. We can be there. We can try to chase that North Star. I think it's a great way to achieve that.
Yeah, and from the design side, this kind of metric criteria making, there's so many of us now that we're starting to grapple with what does it mean to be a materials pledge signatory, that are making some version of this. And all our clients are, well, a lot of our, the leading clients are also making some version of this. And the promise of doing a basic, better, best is like, can we all like align around some basic frameworks about what we're asking for? both, because we know it's going to be easier to get information from manufacturers and digitize it, but also so that like we're not having to navigate the nuances of different criteria and different projects, and having to just kind of go to school every time you start a new project and you have a new set of sustainable materials standards.
That is a fair and realistic point for sure. All right, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where I can't be more excited now too about what we're starting to work on, or been working with BuildingEase, the whole collective over the last year and a half or so, to really get this from what we've been doing manually in an Airtable and kind of piloting just through tools we've bootstrapped ourselves into something that's really a live platform, and connected to live data. So Brent can manage it and the product information stuff at Kingspan that then connects into it and updates. We've been working in a system where it's like, oh yeah, I noticed on Kingspan's site there's a new certification. This one's updated. So I'll go to 7 different Airtables and update each of my clients individually. And hopefully that gets pushed out to project teams. That's been the most efficient way so far. And clearly that's not the most efficient it could be. And it just doesn't reach a big audience. So to be able to have it so you can have one place where data goes in, manufacturers can manage it well, and then we can start to layer on these evaluations and ratings. It's super exciting to see where it's coming now, to be able to have the sort of like the filters of, if you're in BuildingEase in the library, if you could just filter like, well, I'm looking for at least better in this category and basic here, to see the products that are compliant with that, and just have that updated as products update. It just takes the whole burden off of just being data wranglers.
Yeah. I want to give a little bit of insight on what this means from the other end, right? Like for years, we've had a number of platforms, we've had another of avenues and kind of baby steps in the right direction. The difference of where we sit today with the common materials framework level setting what we're asking and how we're asking for it and what defines it. And then tools like what BuildingEase has done is we're digitizing the information. You heard about how we're digitizing EPDs. There was a huge push with EC3 and digitizing from PDFs. Like we're literally still running off PDF data where you couldn't get the information out. That's basically happening to all of the certifications, to all of the product data. And my Kingspan and a number of other companies have been working with BuildingEase early on to say, how can we present all of our data that we control as a source of truth directly and share it with tools like BuildingEase to fill in and then lay over all the CMF, all of the BBB stuff, that information, and make sure it's accurate, right? That is the huge milestone that we're finally able to start achieving. We don't have to worry about scrape data. We don't have to worry about, we were talking about this before the call started, is scraping data is fine it gets you out of the gate, but then you don't know when it was timestamped. You don't know when that data was scraped. Was it a year ago? Was it 2 years ago? You don't know if it's accurate still or up to date anymore. This ecosystem is solving all of those challenges so that the user on the design side goes in and says, I know that this information is accurate, and I know that I can trust making decisions based on it, right? Now, there is a huge lift, like there always has been, of providing that information from the manufacturer side. BuildingEase and other providers are making it as simple as possible. Physically, we went through the exercise of this digitization of construction materials, right? So we've created a PIM, which is a product information management tool. So we have a massive database of all of our information, which we didn't have. We just didn't organize product data that way. But going through that, we can now share it with BuildingEase, and it has all the environmental attributes, all the certifications are behind it. And we can push that over and know it's accurate. And any manufacturer can go that route. Or we can still go and export the data, and send it off to BuildingEase, and they can map and import it that way. There's a number of options to get the data in, but what we can do with it once it's in systems like this is incredible. Then you can harness the power of all these tools and all the things that we've been building on.
Yeah, Lana, how much does this help with the workflow side of it? And like once that data's in there between projects, specs, AIA reporting.
Yeah, I think you both know, but the audience at large might not know that I've been looking for the workflow tool solution for well over a decade at this point. And the big roadblock was always that I don't need a sustainable product database. I need a place that can be a workflow tool, both for aggregating, Perkins&Will firm-wide libraries around switch list or BBB or other criteria, but also, to have a real place of truth on each project about what the palette is for that project. What are the interior and exterior finishes that the designers really care about? And, once we can really start using a workflow tool like this, then we can have it, information about, what are those products we always specify because they're super sustainable, but we don't get them on projects. And can we diagnose why we don't get them on projects? Where are the categories that, we're not asking for anything in particular yet, but now there's starting to be data. I always say that, like, when one manufacturer in a certain category falls, their competitors usually do too in a few years. And I know as architects and designers, we're always looking for, that 3 or more manufacturers, especially on, public competitively bid projects, but pretty much on all the projects, we want to make sure there's a little competition if we're going to ask for certain criteria. So it enables us to be, to have a place where we're doing all the work, because we're doing whole buildings, and some of them, honestly, at this point, can't meet any criteria. But we also want to keep pushing it. We want to keep building on the momentum we have and, expand the work, because eventually we want to get to those buildings. We're supporting all 5 CMF or Materials Pledge impact categories on the whole building. All the materials
Yeah.
are regenerative. That's the goal, but we have to start having a better way of working to even start moving towards that goal.
Yeah.
And having that database too helps with even calibrating the BBBs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about the compliance,
Like
the
you're saying, like, we need
organization?
to have 3. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the other piece, that, like, knowing that everyone has different, or people, it's okay for different organizations to have different standards. And like I was saying before, some organizations really want to push carbon, others health, other circularity. If different orgs are driving different sides of this and can keep pushing that forward, that's a great thing. So to be able to say, like, let me look in this whole database and I want to set organization requirements for better, above, and health. And then that just spits out here's all the ones that are compliant with it. You don't have to build up a whole library from scratch. You don't have to do that research day one. It's just being able to filter it based on your priorities. So whether you're looking at, I'm going to be really push one impact area, or I'm going to try to be holistic and hit basic in all the impacts, it's really being able to filter based on priorities without having to do research from the ground up.
That's a
Yeah.
really
And again,
important point
compliance is
about
always
not
something
doing.
that's like, on the compliance, it's also just like, yeah, we have our standard and we have what we're going for. And then there's the project realities where it's like, we want to be hitting best, but sometimes it's like, well, we're going to need 3 equals. And this is this really unique situation in the project where it has to also have these performance things and there's only 2 options. So instead of just kind of throwing it out the window, it's like, well, let's at least go for better then, or at least basic. But it's instead of being an all or nothing of compliant or not, it gives that room for negotiation.
Yeah, and building on what you were saying about, like, capturing that work, like, every project, every design and project is doing materials research. And a lot of times that materials research is just done over and over and over again on different projects to be able to pull out, like, this hospital used this flooring material, and you can check in with the team and even the client and see how well that actually performed in the field. That's huge. And, like,
Yeah.
we're looking at doing a design for freedom pilot project. If we start digging into forced labor in the supply chain for one of our projects, like, I want to capture that data somewhere where I can
Yeah.
look at it again right now with all these spreadsheets and all these different places. Like, we're just losing out on all this kind of research
The
that always
rework, yeah.
happens on building projects.
I'm fascinated. The way we've been talking about this for 10 plus years, way longer than that, is this kaleidoscope, right? And we've tried to solve this as an industry multiple times, like this end all be all tool
Yeah.
that has a set of standards, is that, this is what good is, right? That's just not realistically how the construction sector will ever work, and clients are not working. A client could have two different needs on two different buildings. What's fascinating, and I think what gets me most excited about where this takes us, is if interior finishes are important to you and you want to tackle VOCs, but on the outside of the building, you're worried about steel and insulation and the embodied carbon of those products, and VOCs don't matter per se, or some other criteria don't matter. You can start to pick and pull and figure out what are you going to prioritize, or what is the client prioritizing by sectors, by CSI section, by materials, whatever category it is. And that's kind of a fluid piece, but it also gives you, Lana, to what you're saying, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in deeper, but it allows the firm to say, these are the products we should be using, right? Like, it's just a set of information that we can quickly pull from to not do that rework, right? And I think what's interesting about this idea of massive, large architectural firms versus very small 5, 10, 15, 20 people, don't have a research arm, don't have a sustainability team or a sustainability person, right? You solve and eliminate a lot of billable hours or non-billable hours in with tools like this, right? I mean, you can say, hey, this can become our go-to, and it's constantly live, it's constantly in flux, it's constantly being updated. You can reevaluate things. I think that's where all this will really take us.
Yeah, and our go-to can be the criteria, the filters within the digital ecosystem, not products, because new products come online all the
All the
time, and
time.
maybe we're missing something. And if we can just filter by the criteria we care about, then we can look for those new products that come on
Yeah.
and support them.
Yeah. Interesting. I was just looking at like the non-compliant example here where you get a client that says, here's our basis of design, or here's our master spec for this project. And when you screen it or when you run it through something like this, you start to flag you've been using products that really aren't ideal. Like, you need to replace these. You need to take this out of your spec and replace it with something as good or better, right? But make better decisions. You see stuff that's, from long, long ago doing architecture, you kind of cut and paste and you just reuse stuff until you realize, oh, we need to change something, right? And this is the catalyst for that change.
Yeah, and I
And
did
it's
the study with a summer intern. It was like, 5 or 8 years ago now, where we looked at a healthcare systems like commonly used products, looked at, I think it looked at about 6 projects. And we found places where they were accidentally, hitting healthier materials criteria. So like that's good information too, is you think you're not doing anything at all, and you're actually, hiring good architects and designers that are giving you better materials without you asking for it, then you
Yeah.
can, okay, lock that in and let's move on to the next thing. And I think that you really hit on something important too. I always give this piece of advice is like, you don't need to do everything. Start on your next project and do something. And I think like, if we can collectively all be doing something, then somebody's over here working on forced labor issues, and somebody's over here working on circularity, and somebody's, really all in on carbon, then we all benefit from that if we
Yeah,
start to have this digital connected ecosystem.
absolutely. No, for sure.
Yeah. On
Oh,
that note, Brent, do you want to show? There's one more slide in here
yeah.
that shows an example from
Yep.
University that they've been doing just what you've been saying of like, so they had an initiative to part of their sustainability strategic plan was to safeguard human health, reduce the use or minimum of any toxic chemicals and materials. Um, and they've been doing a lot of that already. We started by looking at just what's on your projects, and they had they worked with great architects, planners, contractors who often were using good materials already. So it was just kind of like standardizing that and setting the baseline as a start of like, let's make that at least the norm. and try to go from there. And like
Yeah.
we see a lot of, like, you go to conferences, presentations, there's material pedal projects and there's the flagship projects that are like really, really impressive. And it can almost be intimidating sometimes to be like, wow, it's a unique project. And this is where, so Brandon started with just 5 material categories, 5 like high priority interior product categories that have high impact, that there are healthier options. And so let's set those as a minimum. And it made such a huge difference. And it was something they were able to internalize, that is their standards, and then keep raising the bar from there. So just want to express too, like, this doesn't have to be materials pedal or nothing, or it doesn't have to be perfect or nothing. Like
Yeah.
the basic, better, best tier standards can be something that's like, get a couple product categories that you're using a lot of, start setting standards for the basic and go from there. But it gives a more flexible and like scalable framework over time.
You know what really helps, Jack, this, and when you have a case study or, a particular case on a project or a case study with a client is, and Lana, to your point, is you start to implement new materials or you change out old materials. What I think will really add value down the road is going through this process, continually optimizing and improving. And you can also then back it up with real data that says this project was completed on budget, on time, right? That's the ultimate piece that gets pushed back on, is saying, hey, this is our materials. This is what we used on that project. We made all these great decisions. We screened these things and we built out this product portfolio and we kept it on budget, right? And there was no delays. It's all the things that are really critical. Logistically, I get that. Every client is, we have a lot of clients that are like 100% on time, in full, no missed deadlines. And there's so much revenue at stake to what they're building. I totally understand that. This should give us the reinforcement to make those better decisions. And there's nothing else that you're subsidizing or pulling back from later on. Like, we can now start to show this at a more granular level. That will change our behavior.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that this always costs more money. And these cases where we look at, clients and look at their past projects and figure out that they were already hitting a number of things, it just destroys that myth that it always
Yeah.
costs more.
Yeah.
And especially if it's set like standardizing a preferred spec, I can't tell you how much the maintenance and operations leaders are so appreciative. Like, yep, we have our 3 paint options, flooring options. We use them and we know them, they perform. So it like, and there's the cost saving advantages of, yeah, if the bulk purchasing or collective purchasing, even that can even bring down costs below.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we're about 15 minutes out. We have a lot of questions, which is exciting to see it came in the chat. That's always good, and I'm not really surprised by that. Why don't we take the last 4 minutes and we'll just talk about practical implementation, right? Lana, I think you have a great perspective working from ZGF to Perkins&Will, working for large firms, but also put some context of how any firm at any scale can deploy and utilize this and implement.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the just do something. Now that I'm at Perkins&Will, it's a much bigger ship to navigate. So there's a huge potential for impact there. And part of the reason that I jumped over to Perkins&Will is the fact that we are leaders in the industry that like to give our thought leadership and knowledge away. So like a lot of what we're working on is also in service of the bigger materials movement, and that's a really important piece of why we're doing this work. But of course, we want to be leaders and show that leadership in our work. There are places you can start. I mean, one of the places that I really started on when I jumped over here was looking at what are all those things that I can start to build into our template specifications. So where's those places where we know we can require certain things and certain product types, and let's start to lock those in. But I'm also working on how do we make this easier for project teams, and if we can streamline the data
Yeah.
into a real workflow tool, I think that's going to be the trick. So we're working on that. Can we get our firm-wide libraries and our project work all in one place so we understand how we're hitting certain criteria without having to do manual work somewhere else, and how much progress that we're making so that we can start understanding where we're at and if we're heading in the direction that we want to be.
Yeah. Anything, Jack, on your end? I know you're working. You get to help be the implementer a lot of times and be the middleman in between this and the projects and the owners.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. We're working a lot of time at the program level that it's trying to, but it's really like, how can we empower the project teams or even like nurture teams to be able to just do this as easily as possible and not have it be an additional lift. So I'm not the designer or the architect on any projects aside from on home run. So to be able to give teams easy options of saying like, this is going to be compliant with the client standards, or this is going to meet or exceed certain targets without them having to become toxicologists or environmental specialists and get into all the weeds of it. That's where it's like it really can put this into action. So even with the basic better best, the clients that are using it often was like Brown has we require basic here and better here, and that's just Brown minimum compliance. And then they have their preferred target stretch goals, but to really simplify it as much as possible so that the people who care about it can make good decisions, but they don't have to be specialists to do so.
Yeah. So I just want to be clear too, so everyone on the call understands. The BBB that Jack is talking about, that is a Brightworks tool that you guys have built and
shared. So
shared,
Brightworks, Perkins&Will, Green
So,
Commons have all been working together. But I think the collaboration is just really important to highlight because it's from that like it's been able to
feeding into BBB, not yet public at the moment, but the goal is that becomes another tool set that gets to be used.
Yeah, and I'm seeing in the chat a question about can the firms that do this research be able to make this money or make these databases more available, and that's where we're going. So as more manufacturers get the data in, as it's QA QC'd and made sure to be reliable and accurate, once we have that kind of confidence, then that's really where we're hoping as soon as that's in there that we can make BBB something that's accessible to broader designers.
And obviously BuildingEase is up and running, and that's been working really well. That's something, again, back to that kind of industry collective, same thing. We've been supporting that and feeding our data in that digital component into BuildingEase to test that pilot and see what it look like. So this is not hypothetical kind of pie in the sky. Like, these tools are partially being used already in pilot and should be available, in the nearest future here to do. The CMF is very well established, getting that information. So we are closer than we've ever been at making some monumental change.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the first presentations where the slides you showed, those weren't mock-ups. Like, that was a real screenshot of the platform. That's so exciting. Yeah.
This is true. All right, so we've got about 11 minutes left, and I am glad we've got a bunch of questions. So I'll go through, I'll read them out, and we'll just kind of take them as they go. What are your thoughts on sustainable vinyl coming out of Europe that have no petrochemicals or additional chemicals of concern like phthalates, PFAS, or heavy metals?
It sounds like it's not vinyl.
Yeah, doesn't sound like it's vinyl.
A non-petrochemical based vinyl sound.
Yeah. I think this is where the screening and the tools get right down to the data, right? It's what those claims or what that product has to substantiate those claims gets layered over the filters and the tools inside to show, how it will perform or how it will stack up.
Yeah, and so Carnegie Fabrics just did a great presentation on vinyl too at Living Future. They even spoke towards like there's a lot of marketing around healthy vinyl that's like doesn't have some of those phthalates added to it. Even the best like the vinyl without all the additives still has tons of life cycle concerns. And even if like you could produce it in a contained way that doesn't have emissions, like, don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure Habitable research says like 50% of the vinyl produced in in the United States, those manufacturers continuously year after year just violate EPA policies, release dioxins, and so just because it could be healthier, the reality is it's not the way it's being produced.
Yeah. Second question, can tools like this help feed into whole building lifecycle analysis? Velux in Europe was showing design tools that feed into their whole building models with both embodied energy in category A1 through 3 or B1 through 5. Operational data. Do they need to meet building codes for max CO2 per year?
I mean, I think there are better tools for embodied carbon modeling. This is not really meant to be that. I think there are definitely lots of connections between lots of different digital tools being made now. So like that's something that could be enabled, but I don't think this is meant
Yeah,
to be the place for that.
yeah, I
I'm
agree. I
pretty
think
sure the
it's
Revit yeah, the Revit plugin for BuildingEase is, if not active, it's soon to come. And I think that's where we're getting to, of like integrations and connected tools, because there's not going to be the one tool that rules them all. Like we
yeah,
need to use different tools for different functions.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a source of data that could feed into those tools, but it won't be. I don't think it's meant to be that.
Brent,
Uh,
before you go on the next question, I was going to skip to one of the newer questions about BuildingEase being available publicly. I wanted to make sure we got that
oh
point.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
BuildingEase is very much available publicly. Green Commons, Brightworks, and Perkins&Will were working together on this BBB collective and using BuildingEase as a platform for that. But there are lots of other firms that are using BuildingEase and using their own criteria filters within that. And I'm just going to take the next question
Next
to
one
what
goes
does
into yeah,
CMF
yeah,
relate to the Materials Pledge? So the Materials Pledge established the 5 impact categories: human health, climate health, ecosystem health, social health and equity, and a circular economy. The CMF really came in and built on those 5 impact categories and started giving definition to them. So let's look at the landscape of the information that we have available right now, and what is the data within that we should be looking at to support the Materials Pledge.
yep. And then Jack, if you want to take the third one there, is the BBB platform, is this BBB platform that will bring other platform information together, sustainable minds, mindful materials, others?
Not really. It's more like so we're building the logic for, if CMF says here's the different factors in a consistent way and what certifications contribute to those factors, BBB lays out the benchmarks for uh, what's just defining basic, better, best in a given impact area. So we're defining the logic of that says that automates those rules in BuildingEase. But that can also, like we're saying, it can be ported out, connected into other tools and platforms. That's where it can feed others. So it's more of a reverse, actually, of kind of what that question is of uh, instead of bringing together in, it's more of it feeds the others.
Yeah. There's a question about how do you juggle the numerous mindful materials data partners? How do you choose who to work with? I think it's more clarification that tools are like the BuildingEase tool is fed into, it's more to be a data hub, right? The data is feeding into BuildingEase to be used, and they are very open to collaboratively sharing that data in and out, right? That's the idea, is that this becomes a workflow system, not a locked up only, only they're utilizing the information. We've got to get out of this idea that your data gets locked up in one place and that's it. It has to be certification bodies are feeding into platforms, platforms are feeding into other platforms. That's where we need to go with this, and away from the idea that it's just park your data here or park your data in another place. That's not going to give us the scale that we need. And back to my earlier comment, if manufacturers are going to take the time to put their data digitally in a place or in a tool, then the value is that that's shared and that can be used elsewhere and not scraped so that we're all looking at the same data. Manufacturers will have to probably agree to that, saying, I'm going to give it to BuildingEase. Can they share it with, you know, Ecomedes or share it with, another tool? That's fine. But that's the direction of travel that we're trying to take this.
Yeah, and when I was talking about like having the stream about the project workflow tool for over a decade, there's a lot that's happened in the last decade that's connecting data. So your EPDs and HPDs are flowing via APIs into BuildingEase, and that's a lot of what enables this work to start to define the data points within those documents and be able to filter by them and know that it's based on live, unexpired data.
Yeah. Can firms that do the legwork to create these well-researched databases make some money off of their work? Can other firms subscribe to the ones that are the ones that are doing the work?
We've seen it more as a trying to do it philanthropically, or out of like we just want to get this out there. So it's more of once it's ready and accurate, we trust it, sharing it with as many as possible. I don't know if there's the business model behind it per se.
Yeah.
Seeing another question too of like, are recovering natural materials like bamboo, adobe, or I think addressing on the bio-based, and we also have a lot of what are smaller manufacturers that are doing great things, but they don't have a budget for getting a $25,000 cradle to cradle certification. I think it's come down, but it's like, how do we recognize just better types of products? That's when with BBB in a lot of the areas, or in like health impact areas, if people are familiar with Habitable's informed hazard ranking, if they're not, check it out. But it gives a great ranking of like products on average within a given category. Certain types are better, like cork, linoleum flooring is going to be in the green. It's going to be one of the best options consistently. So that's really, even if it's not, doesn't have the certification or document, if there's a given product type where we know is inherently better, that can qualify it to be what we say like an alternate compliance pathway of, yeah, torque is always at best, or certain types are always at least better. So trying to make space that we can incorporate bio-based and smaller manufacturers that don't always have to be.
Yeah. I think it's important too, Jack, to mention that this is a continuously evolving ecosystem and tool and software, right? So as certifications come online, you guys they're being vetted and brought into tools like this and being included as more products come in and saying, now we have these certifications. The eco-label soup is always growing, right? There never seems to be a stop to that, which is fine. And as they feed in, you can vet them and they can go through the criteria. And to my point earlier about, you mentioned too about the cost, is you can say, hey, there's 4 pathways to get from basic to better. And as a new product or a smaller manufacturer, let me take the pathway that gets me somewhere and start there without huge cost incurred, right? You don't have to go something that's very long and very like time consuming and very expensive. I think Nick's coming in to pull or we're 2 minutes away.
Can I make just a quick plug to participate in Mindful Materials? The CMF will continue to evolve over time.
Yes.
So lots more work to be done.
And lean on your manufacturers. Ask them to participate and put their data in tools like BuildingEase and use Mindful Materials and use the CMF to disclose their product information. It would be incredibly helpful for manufacturers to put their data out in the same types of format, in the same criteria categories, so that we start to all see it in the same formats. All right. That was pretty good, man. We came in within a minute of our time to get pulled off stage.
Yeah, you guys did great. Okay, awesome. I can wrap us up. So we're right at time, so I'll keep the wrap up brief. Thank you everyone for participating today for this great session. The webinar recording will be available on the webinars page on the Greenbuild website. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.